In this episode of Startup Hiring, I'm talking to Ciaran Alstowe. Ciaran is the head of sales or sales lead at Cuttable and has been there for just over a year, helping them to shape their go-to-market strategy. He's worked at previous startups. He's founded his own business in the UK. And in this discussion, you'll hear him share his thoughts on how to hire, how to onboard salespeople, the things that he looks for in new salespeople. And I think what I like the most is how it's clear that he takes a lot of responsibility for onboarding new hires and seeing them succeed. And one of the things that you'll hear us talk about is how leadership is about creating the conditions of success. And that's the responsibility of leadership as far as I'm concerned. Hiring is one thing, onboarding is another. But if as a leader, you're not creating the conditions that allow your new hire to succeed, then you're probably doing them and probably yourself and the business a disservice as well. So I hope you'll get some good information out of this. If you're a founder looking to hire, you're thinking now's the right time to hire a first salesperson, this one will be good for you. If you're a salesperson who's looking at moving roles and thinking about what that next role might look like, you'll hear Ciaran talking about the traits that he looks for in new salespeople that maybe you can talk about in your resume, maybe that you can talk about in an interview. So I hope you enjoy this one. If you do, please share, subscribe, leave your comments. They'll all get an answer. Feel free to join us over on Substack as well and subscribe there if you're not already. All the best and enjoy this one. Cheers.
Hey mate, really good, thank you. Really good. Leeds United winning on the weekend, champion. So you've got me in a good mood.
Well, for once we have. Normally, for anyone listening or watching, this is the happiest you'll probably ever be, Ciaran. So let's make the most of it. Ciaran, you've built and led sales teams from zero to scaling, and you've been right inside sort of the early messy days of startups. And I guess I'm excited to sort of dig into the real lessons from some of those experiences. Yeah, you've built and led sales teams at Cuttable and Easil. How's your approach to hiring and building early sales teams evolved over time?
Yeah, it's changed a lot. It's probably a really short and quick answer, but yeah, I think back in the UK, having my own startup and then moving into Easil as well. Like I think early in my career, you definitely cadence for hiring people like you default to your own network or very much like Simon, do you know someone that could fill this role? And I think at the time, it's like that natural instinct of like, this is great. I have confidence in these people. I can get them back in. But like in hindsight, it really starts to limit that diversity of thought and pace of growth. And it probably wasn't until I started to work in other markets. So I got, with my own startup, got the opportunity to work in the US. With Easil, got the opportunity to go over to the US. And now, obviously, just like you, I've made the move down under 18 months ago. And you start to go, wow, there's this huge pool of talent. And you kind of really have to like actively look beyond. And it's harder, and rely on great people like yourself to like break into that. And I think that's probably a good summary, because I think it's tough to really open it up.
Yeah. And so when you're building a sales team and you're sort of hiring the first few sales reps at a startup, what's some of the biggest mistakes that you sort of see founders or sales leaders make, and how can they avoid them?
Yes, I think it probably goes back to your previous question as well of like early stage startups is tough to hire. Like, it's not for everyone. You don't have the choice of every single person in the market. You have to really get the right culture and show externally that this is a good place to come and work, and really like jump into that why if you want to be there. And I always say, and again, this is probably something from the sporting background in me as well, of early stage is chaos in many ways. And I think people get really caught up on you can't hire for a startup or go to a startup and expect personal development and growth in the traditional sense. It's something that I think, yes, you can, and you have to meet hires where they're at as well. So, what does their 5-year journey look like? And actually, how does that fit into your journey? Because everyone always jokes with the startup hiring is, or I guess a year is like 7 years. It's like dog years. So I always say, like, if you can get 1 to 5 amazing years out of someone, great. And if you can build an environment that they grow with the business, then even better. But if not, you've given them that platform to go on and succeed in their career. And hopefully they've left behind something amazing as well. But yeah, probably to that point, I guess, hiring and the mistakes, and definitely have made these as well. I think at an early stage startup, you can sometimes, you traditionally get this 0 to 1, like founder led effect. I'm really fortunate at Cuttable of, I guess, hopefully coming in with a founder's hat, and I've really had the trust of the founders to not only go and sell, but also like grow that function and almost like be a part of that leadership team really, really early on, even though, we were only a few people, not a leadership team as such. But I think with sales in particular, timing is everything, right? And I think, you saw this with us at Cuttable as well. And you get in this position where you can sometimes go to market and think you need like proven closers. I always say, I think especially at 0 to 1 and probably all the way up to 0 to 10, like you're actually looking for in sales hires is builders, more than closers. It's people that they're going to build the first pitch deck. They're going to help you refine the ICP. They're going to really learn in public. And I always kind of try and say to people that I work around that, kind of act like product managers as well. Like we're not going to win every deal. But let's have a really, really good way of recording. This is why we're losing. And actually quite a lot of the time we're analyzing why we're losing as much as why we're winning. And I think that's really important, but it takes a certain type of person. Traditionally, roles within sales, and I personally found, not being in the tech industry to begin with and then moving into it, everything is about crushing quota, got to hit over 100%. You've got to pick up your commission check. That's all that matters in sales. Whereas I actually think if a sales team and salespeople, and this spans right across the go-to-market function of marketing and CS, of like, how can you lean in? How can you help build a better product? The company's success should be aligned with yours. And I think that's the opportunity, but you can very easily make the mistake of like, here's this really great hire. He's quota at, this amazing company. He's going to come and build loads of value, but there'll be a lot of systems and process built around that person. So you are looking for a different type of person, and that's super important.
Yeah. And so someone who can help build systems, build approaches, build pitch decks, build the conversation and the language that we're having with prospects, who hopefully then become leads or become customers, is as important as the ability to sell. I think there's also something to be said for founders if they're hiring their first sales leader, and the founders at Cuttable are obviously lucky to have you doing this for them, but it's also about, to my mind, building that function from scratch. And if you're then hiring a sales team, building in the knowledge, the repeatable behaviors, and the keys, the paths to success in your sales team as well, because everything's new. There is no playbook. And just because somebody did really well at Leeds doesn't mean they're going to do well at Barcelona. Different team, different managers, different players, different set of rules, different tactics. And so I think being really clear for founders and that first sales lead or first sales hire, being really clear about how you're going to build that function and recognizing that this is good enough for now, but we're going to be evolving as we grow, incredibly important. And I think something that gets overlooked a lot.
Well, definitely. And I think, to your point on playbooks, it's funny. I could be rewriting the playbook at Cuttable every week at the moment because of how fast things are changing. And I think at this stage, leaders need to realize you are the playbook. Your hires that you're getting around you, you need to lead from the front. How are you selling? How are you learning? How are you showing them the right attitudes and behavior to turn up? Because if you're forever just looking to document a playbook and look at process, it's just not going to work. It's not going to work. And, I think people don't always talk about how mentally tough it is to be that first lead at this stage. And, you know, I saw this funny quote around like, you know, startups not rewarding perfect timing, they reward adaptability. And, you know, I'm definitely have been guilty in the past of kind of not hiring because, and pushing myself almost to breaking point because you don't feel like you have the right environment for someone. It's something that I've definitely learned of actually, you don't have to have everything ready. You don't have to have all the processes around you ready. Like you need to get the right person to almost join you and go, it's okay. Like I'm willing to be in this kind of gray with you. And I'm here because of you and you're there because of them, and build it together.
Yeah. And I think especially, you know, super early stage where, you know, despite best intentions and all the assumptions in the world, until you actually get on the phone with prospects and leads and understand what their pain points are, and you start talking to them about how your product can solve it, you don't really know what the market reception is going to be like. So this adaptability and the ability to just get the right script for now, and we refine it, and we, at the end of the week, we review the 10 demos that we did, and we gauge a reaction, we dissect that helps then inform the language and the way we go into next week's demos, because we've learned something this week. And I think that's quite alien for a lot of established salespeople, where things are already set in stone and this is what you do, this is the way.
Yeah, 100%. I think you know, I won't even talk about how many hours worth of demos I did last year. And certainly if you valued success purely on conversion to a customer, then, you know, it was a tough year, but actually what it led to was loads and loads of product learnings. And I think that's the difference. Probably, and I see it when I speak to colleagues that work for larger organizations of they want this almost within their organization. These pod-like structures of getting closer to a sales engineer or the product person or the product marketer. But within an early stage, you have that live. So yes, you know, just because this sales call might not end in a sale, it's having the mentality to go, but it's okay. I'm going to learn everything about this customer's problem. And I'm going to take that back to the team. And like you say, you do that enough and you start to go, this is what customers are wanting. And then you start to get pulled from the market. And that is what every early stage startup is looking for. You're wanting that pull. And then you go, this is where we should build and focus our attention.
So going back to early sales team members, then when you're hiring for those roles, what sort of traits and signals do you prioritize beyond just, you know, a good looking CV and, you know, possibly a good pedigree? I'm talking specifically about when you're maybe on a first call with a salesperson, or you're having a first discussion.
Yeah, I think, you know, and you've been amazing at this, in my time working with you as well. So like, people buy off of people. I think the first thing at this stage I'm kind of looking for is, can I work with this person every single day? Because it's a small team, you know, so when you're hiring into it, I am going to see you all the time. There's going to be early mornings, there's going to be late nights, there's going to be a lot of travel together, there's going to be a lot of time in the office together. And you're looking for someone of, if things get tough, will you be in the trenches with me? You know, or like, are you going to help the team, or are you here purely for self? And I think, you know, again, like time at like high level sport, I think teaches you a lot about that, of like, can you see some resilience within people? And I do think people that compete at sport, and whether it's good level or an elite level, there is an element of resilience. There is an element of teamwork. Like, you never get to, you know, in my sport triathlon, you don't get to a start line by yourself. There's a team of people around you, even though it's an individual sport. Football, to me and you, it's the same. It's a big team that gets success. So I think, that level of resilience. But then a huge thing for me is just coachability, like non-negotiable. how can this person take feedback and work on it? Because as we just touched on, things are changing every single week. The playbook is getting completely rewritten. And we may put loads of effort into one area or one piece of work, and suddenly it needs to be dropped to moved on. And like, it can be heartbreaking sometimes. But it's actually, how do you go, no, I'm going to pick myself up and I want to be here. And I think a great way to kind of see that, or I guess an additional point of like what I love, especially at this stage, is people who have like built their own things or have written about learnings, or they've done something else outside of work that's kind of challenged them, or, they've pursued a passion project. Sorry. Like it doesn't actually matter what it is. But it just shows that, you can go and jump into something, and when you love something, you naturally do better at it. And I love that energy into an early stage business.
And I think probably a good accompaniment to this pod as well is, now I'm thinking about it, is I might put a link to some good quality questions that people can ask to really sort of try and unpack this. But I think, high level, asking people about times where things have got really difficult, how they've managed it, it's a really good way to go. If the response you're getting is flimsy, or people haven't got any examples of things that have been tough, where everything's been easy, they're either, one, trying to mask the fact that they're not perfect, which is one thing to be wary of. And secondly, if they've been in environments where everything is handed to them, or playbooks and processes are already established, I'd question whether they're going to be right for you, despite best intentions, because there's going to come times where things are challenging and the path ahead isn't clear. And for some people, that's terrifying. For other people, it's exciting.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a big thing people can definitely make mistakes in hiring. And I've had it the other way. I didn't necessarily have the traditional linear approach to or progress in terms of a sales career in tech. I think sometimes you can be kind of like, no, they're not for us, because they've done it in a slightly different way. And I think that's where those soft skills are super important, because it's not to say X person at this large company can't learn that, or they will want to learn that, but it's, are they going to be open to that as a challenge? And like you say, if you can tease that out in those early questions, and it might be in their personal life, you might realize something and be like, do you know what? You deal with challenge every day in your personal life, and you have overcome some incredible things. Well, you are going to be just fine here. With that attitude. So I always think it's, a person is way more than their CV. And getting to speak to them and understanding the story is so important. And to the analogy that I think I saw you use on LinkedIn the other day, like you could have a star A player, put them in one organization, and it just doesn't work. But you put them in another, and they thrive, and they turn into the A player that everyone thought they were going to be. So it's a two-way street all the time.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that as well comes back to how leaders think about leadership. Leadership to me is about creating the conditions for success. When hires don't work out, we kind of need to look in the mirror a little bit. Did we rush the decision making? Did we not listen to the gut? Were we unclear with expectations? Did we not onboard them properly? Did we not give them the access and the tools and the time they need to learn about our product, our process, our customers? It's very few people turn up to work or start a new job with the mindset of, I'm going to do as little as possible and see how long I can get away with it. Most people want to be successful. Most people want to succeed. But if we don't create these conditions for success and they don't work out as a hire, deep down, look in the mirror, it's probably down to us. You've obviously founded your own business. You've led teams inside fast growth startups. What leadership or hiring lessons have stuck with you the most through that?
Yeah, I think there's so many. There's so many.
Pick one.
and we're always learning. I think timing is the big one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super difficult. And I've been on both sides of this. Originally, a company I was working for when I moved over to Australia, I was due to expand over here with them. Super excited. I loved the company. I loved the why. I loved people. Unfortunately, I got made redundant 3 days before I moved to Australia. So a tough one to take. And that has kind of carried, I guess, into hiring. It was like, it was always that way of like, I knew the importance around timing and creating an environment that, as you say, you're allowing people to come in and succeed. And unfortunately, I had to let a few people go a month or so ago, and it took a lot out of me because you want them to succeed, and there's definitely, I always see kind of failure on my behalf as well. And I think that's, how I now try and lead is lead with clarity, lead with empathy, have that real people first lens. Like you say, create an environment that you can coach people to go on and do better things. And, traditionally, like I say, I've worked in construction, I've worked in health, I had an events business when I was in the UK. And I kind of think that variety is a good thing. But sometimes that diversity, it doesn't always get respected within the tech industry. And it's a really strange one. But yeah, I think for me, it's the importance of kind of soft skills and looking at people from different backgrounds. And yeah, timing and timing's everything within a startup, and it's difficult, but you can't always get it right. But I like to think that, when you get it wrong, like you say, it's important to kind of put your hands up and be like, yeah, we didn't get this right. And then lead with empathy, support those people, to make sure they succeed in whatever they do next.
Yeah. In Cuttable's early days, you were sort of obviously involved in sort of finding product market fit and shaping the GTM. How do you do this when nothing is entirely figured out yet? Like, where do you start?
I would, it's
the beginning.
It's a tough one. Where do you start? I think the funny thing I can remember, in my first few weeks at Cuttable, one of our founders will testament to this. I think I opened up a kind of a spreadsheet and created myself a tracker and a to-do list of all the things that I wanted to do. And we didn't even have a CRM at the time. And so I was trying to get across, the first thing I think you should do is get across who your current customers are. We had none. So that was pretty quick. But it was a case of going, okay, there's so many things to do, but what is going to guide us to this first magical point, which I guess for us was a first customer, having a product that someone wanted. You do that by speaking to customers and speaking to as many as possible. And I think it's really in those early stages, you're not selling. You are very much a business consultant. You have a lens and a direction in terms of where you want to go as a company, and definitely had that from our founders of, this is the problem, we've identified, we're in market, we're trying to solve. And this is the type of company we are and how we want to show up. But you're getting on those customer calls and learning. And I think that's what great, I was going to say early salespeople, but I actually think any salesperson, you discover, you're like, you should be there finding intel for product. How are you collaborating with all of your multidisciplinary teams? Like, you have to see yourself as that like connective tissue. You are the voice of the customer. So to go into a meeting, not necessarily with an opinion, but go into a meeting with the customer's views. But it needs to be well thought through, because I think sometimes salespeople get a bad rep of, we lose a deal because of X feature, and then we go
Yeah.
into a meeting and just say we have to have this feature,
Yeah.
and that's not right either. So it's really about how do you actually kind of synthesize all the feedback you've heard. AI is amazing at this now. Like traditionally it used to live within a CRM, and it was on loads of different company records. Your deals were all kind of split. It was very, very hard to kind of like segment and maybe go and speak to your founders or product team or engineering team and kind of always get across the business case. Whereas now there's so many great tools out there that you can use to look back over your last 50 customer calls and find trends on where you should be. They're guiding you at the end of the day. If you ask the right questions, my dad always used to say to me, two ears, one mouth. Like if we do more listening, they will guide you in a direction of how you can help them.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's super early stage, and the stage we're describing. This is really about validating a hypothesis. Yeah, all startups are an experiment to see if the business and the product deserves to exist, and all you're trying to do is understand what exactly the customer product is, the customer problem is, and does your product go any way to help them solve that? So validating hypothesis. There's the old saying that sales is a contact sport. Like the more people you can talk to, and again, you're right, using things like AI to synthesize all the transcripts from the last 20 demo calls you've had. Just so helpful, and it helps pick up things you haven't seen before as well. Brilliant. So how then should founders and sales leaders think about aligning hiring plans with business goals when you've got budgets and sales sort of evolving? How do you sort of think about what those next hires should be?
Yeah, something there's kind of two exercises here. One with a founder hat on. I think it's really, really important to have these moments in time where you review your whole org. This isn't a revolutionary idea, but I think people should do it more often and get into the behavior of it and look all the roles you need, strip away the human beings, the people, which is really hard. It's actually not how I ever look at a company. This is a really hard thing for me to do, but strip away the people and just look at the roles you need. What do you need today? What do you need in 90 days? Which, to be honest, is almost like a year in an early stage startup. And then maybe what do you need? What do you think you need in 12 months? Which at an early stage startup, for anyone who doesn't work at one, that will always change. Whether it's way more or way less or different roles, it's always changing. But really start to look at the role you need. And the way I almost like to bring it into kind of the 90-day plan is, what will this role do for our business in 90 days? And reverse engineer it back from there. Because then I think you go in with a really clear plan on, this is the type of person I need, because it's very, very easy. And I think sales is a classic of this, of when you're saying kind of like, how do we align with business goals? Well, we need more revenue, so we need more salespeople. And that kind of always used to be traditionally the process of keep growing. We've got this repeatable structure. We'll just hire more and more into it, and each person is a value of X to our business. It's not like that. It's way more complex. So I think, the titles really are meaningless. And it's, you've got to be driving for the right metrics and really align your hiring to what those deeper business goals are. And the team you build is the company you build. And I think maybe that's one thing people can get wrong at an early stage startup, is they don't realize, and probably 0 to 10 people, maybe up to 50, maybe even all the way up to 100. One person can actually have a really big impact on your culture. Like you get a hire wrong. So I always think as well, like you really need to align not only to that business outcome, but then also go back and go, are these people going to add to the culture?
Yeah.
Not not are they like us?
Mm.
Are they going to bring something different and add to this culture? And I think that's super important. And you can very easily get it wrong. And you that's where a structure, someone like yourself, it's don't just hire for the sake of it. Like
Yeah.
have a structure and a real meaning around why you want that person to come
Yeah.
and join you.
And I think that's kind of trickier to do when you haven't quite hit PMF yet. I mean, once you hit PMF and you're able to look at metrics where it might be something like, you know, for every 10 inbound leads we get, we know historically four move to a call. Out of those four, two will be a demo, and we're closing 50% of those demos over time. We want to increase the number of demo conversions that we're getting. So
Exactly.
so understanding those kind of metrics and where roles fit in with that. We've got enough inbound coming in that if we just converted more demos, we move more prospects to demo to conversion, then our future's in our hands. So now we need to hire somebody who is great on calls, great on demos. We don't necessarily need the hunter, we need the converter. At different stages of the business, yeah, the thinking around that might change. Hey, leads have dropped off because there's a new entrant into the market. When people think that we're another insert large scale competitor, HubSpot, for example. So now we actually need to do more outbound. So for the next 6 months, we've really got to drive outbound sales. Is that where you get to from a metrics perspective?
Yeah, I think so. I think kind of you really need to nail even at an early stage. I'm definitely very data driven. I think it's from time in sport and even now, having your lead in metrics and your trailing metrics.
Yeah.
You don't want to be in a position even in early revenue where you are being reactive of, oh, we're running out of pipeline, therefore we need to address it with X. And I think that probably goes into kind of the type of person and the versatility of the salesperson. And I think that's something that's really starting to change now as well. Again, and maybe we should dive into that more because it's not answering your question. But I definitely think kind of what we're deeming a salesperson to be is changing again. And I think for the better in all honesty.
Cool. Tell me more. In what way do you think?
I just think we're undergoing this transformation kind of shift. So I think pre-COVID and maybe even during COVID, you had so many kind of boom style companies, and we're seeing it again with AI. Don't get me wrong, but I think you definitely had this era of like quota crusher. Whereas now I think we're starting to embrace like the multidisciplinary seller again. So I think people were starting to get pigeonholed in terms of you are a hunter. Like you do loads of outbound, this is what you do. And then you have other people, traditionally your farmer, if you like. You're an account manager or you deal with a lot of inbound. And I think a lot of sellers actually got used to during COVID, depending on where you were working, of having a lot of inbound coming in. So you did just have to get good at closing. You didn't necessarily have to look outside, but I've definitely seen, and speaking to other leaders and other AEs as well, and there is this return now of, I think so. You see some people calling it the 360 seller. I think it's just being a good salesperson. Like you need to. The foundations of every good salesperson, in my opinion, is built on the fact that you can do your own outbound and lead from the front.
Yeah,
I think that's really starting to kind of pull back through again.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more. But I also think that having salespeople who can spot the problem and recognize the problem and then think critically around how to solve it. So is it conversion? Is it we're just not getting enough people from inbound inquiry to doing a demo? Like, why is that? Being able to critically think around these problems, quickly come up with solutions, sense check that with their leader or with founding teams, and then action something. I think these teams that can move quickly to solve problems are going to be the ones that succeed. And I think the term 360 salesperson is probably a good way of describing that. as comfortable taking an inbound call and having a really good discovery call as they are of phoning the 10 heads of marketing or whatever their ICP is, and having a really good quality conversation. I think, it reminds me a little bit of the old do less with more that we all used to hear whenever there was redundancies or headcount cuts. Yeah, that saying that filled everyone with glee, do less with more. But I think it's this thing of being able to solve your own problems.
Yeah, exactly. It's way more than just can you deal with inbound, can you deal with outbound. It's back to, you know, the earlier conversation, and again emphasize definitely at these early stages of how do you work with the rest of the business. Like if sales works in a silo, you are in big trouble, because you're just not going to get the information to kind of product and engineering to help guide the future. You know, one of my big bugbears, and I think it's always funny in terms of sales and marketing teams working polar, you know, like one of the first things we did, a great head of marketing, like here at Cuttable as well. And you know, our metrics are exactly the same. Like our North Star of what we're trying to achieve is the same. Because if you start splitting up the go-to-market function, it's very easy to start getting slippy shoulders then in terms of whose responsibility is what. And again, like I think we need to have that culture within a sales team of, you know, you sign a bad deal, your colleague in customer success has to deal with that.
Yeah.
So don't do that. You have enough leads, right? Like you say, what's the solution? Work with marketing on how do we pull that through?
Yeah. You can't have situations where that mirror an environment that got described to me very early on in my recruiting career in a big old American ERP sales, where the person who sold licensing would get asked for a discount by the prospect, and he'd say something like, I was anticipating this question. I've spoken to customer success, and they're going to do your discount on success on customer support calls. So I can't discount you on licensing, but they're going to do you a deal over there. And then he'd get full commission on full deal, and then just handball the problem over to somebody else. And because that team was in the Philippines, he'd never see them. He'd never sit next to them in the office. He could just swerve their emails, swerve their calls, but it's now their problem. Like, we laugh about those things now, but in a smaller scale business, one, it's just bad practice, but two, there's a very short career span for people who are doing it.
Yeah, definitely. We could probably do a whole hour based on stories, and then also like incentivization and alignment. That's a whole other podcast, but yeah, it's super important. I think, again, to emphasize is like, how do you align sales teams to the same goals as the business? And that's right the way across, by the way, of every department. Everyone should be pulling toward these milestone goals, whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually. You know, everyone should be pulling toward one goal and know how they feed into that. And it's super important. If you make a completely isolated incentive for salespeople that doesn't align with the rest of the business, that is your fault. Again, back to hiring, that's your fault as leadership team, as a sales leader, that you are incentivizing your staff's behavior in a different way to how you want them to act. You know, and that's, it's super important you get it right. And again, with salespeople, like, you may move into a larger org that has a very set structure. I think one business I worked in had 7 different structures in 2 years. Like, these things evolve because you're trying to get the behaviors right of the salespeople, and you've got to learn to, you know, go with that and work with the business as well.
Yeah. You mentioned there that you've got to all be aligned and pulling in the same direction. When you're then interviewing people, is it important that you're seeing some kind of connection from them to what you're doing? Like, must they buy into your mission? Is this not just people selling themselves? Yes, I believe in you, hire me. Like how do you qualify or quantify that?
Yeah, so I always like when people kind of ask me, how will you make me succeed in the first 90 days? Because I
Mm.
think you can tell a lot, back to earlier in terms of like, has this business done their homework in terms of like what good will look like
Mm.
for me and how do I feed that in? But I think for any early stage salesperson, it's asking like founder level questions,
Mm.
of, are you looking to raise a series A and
Mm.
when? What's the current burn rate? Like really dive deep, and don't be afraid to ask these questions as well.
Yeah.
Because personally, I think there should be a level of
Mm. Mm.
transparency with candidates. But yeah, if you can see that candidates are asking questions that are business related, one, I think it means they'll probably be good when they get on a customer call because
Absolutely.
they're understanding, yes, I'm selling this solution, but
Mm.
what is the wider context of this business and the
Yeah.
direction it's going in? But also it means that when they do get in and they start working for you on their first day, if things do change in their day-to-day role, or their targets,
Mm.
they're bought into the why and
Yeah.
into the vision of the company, and they understand
Mm.
like, oh, hey, I do remember on my interview that Simon told me in 12 months we're raising a Series A.
Mm.
So I get the fact that we have to do everything we possibly can at this moment in time to support the business to get to
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And that alignment is super
Mm.
important.
Mm. And I've had people in the past, people on the hiring side, when I've done a debrief on interviews, and they've said things like, "Oh, they asked really really tricky questions," and they were asking. We felt like we were getting interviewed. And my response is like, well, one, that's a good thing, but to your point, particularly around salespeople, if they can have that level of dialogue and they're that comfortable talking to you like that, they're probably going to be great unpacking what a customer's real issue is. I remember once being interviewing with a recruiting business years ago, and we got to the point where we were negotiating salary, and there was a bit of a gap, and the people who were interviewing me were sort of going to town on me a little bit, trying everything to get what they wanted, which is understandable. And then they commented that I was making it difficult. I said to them, but if I can't negotiate my own outcomes, how am I going to be able to sell you and our fees to customers when they negotiate? The negotiation skills have to go both ways. So I think it's a good tell for founders, if you're interviewing salespeople and they're pushing you for things, that's not a bad thing. That's a good place to be.
Yeah, definitely. And there's always a line with these things, but again, like you learn a lot about people when they're under pressure, and if they're asking you questions and they're negotiating with you and they're looking for justification and reasons why, I think it's super important. And yeah, too right. I think we get it wrong of hiring's not a one way street, and obviously I've been on both sides now, and it's super important. Like I encourage people ask as many questions as possible, because it's not like businesses do a try and come to work here and see how you go phase. I know we call that a probation in some ways, but like that's a pretty one-way thing. It's not often that at an end of a probation, a candidate can walk away and be in a good place with another job and go, that one just wasn't for me. That's very difficult. So it's super important that in that interview stage, you're uncovering what is it really going to be like to work here. And I always recommend to people, like, message, if the team is big enough, like message other people that work there as well. Like, hey, how have you found your experience? Or what's it like working under Ciaran? Like exactly. And if you're proud of the environment you've created for the team, I'd hope to think that if anyone called up the team that I had at Cuttable, they turn around and go, yes, like I would 100% work for Ciaran again, and I would recommend that you do go and work for him if a role come up. Like that should be what you're trying to do every day as a leader. Create an environment where people are gutted that they're moving on from you. Like they might have a super exciting opportunity and you wish them all the best, but like you want them to be able to be like, yeah, I'd work for him again in a heartbeat.
Yeah. And these are buying questions as well. People don't ask these questions unless they care, unless they're genuinely interested. So these are nothing but buying questions. I'd rather have those sorts of questions than how many days a week in the office do I have to be? Like, yeah, the more I'm not sure the right way to describe them. The more sort of perfunctory sort of questions where they really don't care. I'm mindful of time. One thing I wanted to ask you, and you touched upon it earlier, was AI. How's AI impacting how you think sales teams function, how they work with broader business, particularly early stage?
Well, yeah, huge. I think for any role, obviously AI is having a massive impact. Um, I'd like to think it's making salespeople a lot more efficient. I think naturally, some people might be kind of lazy going into preparation for a call, or I think I saw a stat the other day around like salespeople are spending 70 to 75% of their time not selling. So, there's lots of businesses popping up in that space to make time for salespeople to just be on more calls. By the time you updated your CRM and given product feedback and trying to take notes and prep for your next calls, there's so many day-to-day uses of AI applications that will only help a salesperson in their day-to-day role. And again, I think you have to lean into that. And that's where the, coaching and people being adaptable, like don't see it as though you're getting replaced, see it as like, this is going to make me way more efficient. And I'm going to be on way more calls, speaking to way more customers, identifying like loads more business problems that we can help solve as a business. So I think, two-way, like AI is impacting the seller greatly, hopefully for the better. And I think people always buy off of people. So I'd like to think that we'll all have a job at least for a while. And that's super important. But I think also AI on the other flip side of the types of company that are popping up, and these aren't new trends, but you're definitely seeing it. I just spent the week in Sydney up at Sunrise, super inspiring environment. Like I think Australia is becoming an amazing emerging kind of like tech ecosystem to be a part of. I think a lot of kind of US companies and even UK companies are seeing Australia also as an amazing test bed to go and do an early expansion as well. So you're seeing huge growth. You're seeing a lot of opportunity. It's starting to, I guess, open up more remote jobs as well. So, I'd really like to think that that's like democratizing opportunity as well. And it's giving people from kind of different backgrounds and geographies or different stages in their life as well to actually enter a career in tech. And I think that's really, really important that the tech ecosystem opens up to that as well, because I think it will only benefit by having kind of more diversity coming into it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I'm mindful of time. Probably time to wrap up. Ciaran, Alstowe, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Simon. Cheers for having me on.
Thanks, mate.